I tried to sneak in that last sip of beer. Welcome, everyone, to tonight's Wednesday Night Live show. I'm your host, John Truncali. Our co-hosts tonight are Tim and Phillip. No Allie tonight. She was trying to make it, but doesn't look like she's going to make it. She's got a lot of stuff going on with her son, so it's his senior year, so she's trying to take it all in and enjoy it, and I don't blame her. I wish I would have done the same. But our guest tonight is retired Lieutenant Diane Goldstein. Diane is a 21-year law enforcement veteran who has been an official representative of the Law Enforcement Action Partnership, which is LEAP, since 2010, serving on the board of directors from 2014 to 2020, and a board chair from 2018 to 2020. She joined the staff as the executive director in 2020. She's a nationally recognized speaker, writer, guest lecturer, on criminal justice and drug policy reform. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here, especially with you, Phillip. Thank you very much for the invitation. You know, it's absolutely amazing. There have been some good things about Twitter, even though I hate X, formerly known as Twitter. And I sit there and I always go, my gosh, because I really feel like Twitter's gonna be gone. It's just, its utility is getting to this point where I don't know if we as advocates, right, can really use it in the way that we used to be able to. And I think it's so important because I found some really unlikely bedfellows. And who knew when I started this journey in drug policy that I would be talking about things like tobacco control, because I hate cigarettes. I'm going to be really honest with you. It's like, but I'm a real firm, believer in liberty, and adults have choice. And we should be using harm reduction and science to reduce the harms of things like substance use disorder or alcohol or tobacco. It doesn't matter. And it's found a great circle of people on Twitter, whether it's drug policy, tobacco control, harm reduction, police Twitter. I've managed to change some hearts and minds using it. And it's terrible that it's at this place where it worries me, because how am I going to find people after this, right?
Yeah. I'm one of the things I'm glad of here in my community in Modesto is our law enforcement started really using Twitter and Facebook to notify and let people know what's going on in their areas. And I love it. I'll hear something going on and I'll just go straight to Facebook and it's updated instantly on Twitter. So I like that they're doing that. But before we start hounding you with questions, I got to say hello to these two guys here, Tim and Phillip. And Tim, and we like to know how our weeks are going, so be prepared.
We do weekly updates on exactly how maniacal or calm our lives happen to be at this moment in time. I would say I'm just going to regurgitate the past and say it's been a fairly average week. I guess the one low point for me was, and this is shouldn't come as any ground shaking sort of thing in the world of home ownership, but my mortgage increased, so I'm not all that happy about that bit of news. I guess I had a shortage in my escrow, and it resulted in an increase. No, it had something to do with the increase in the taxes in my area, and so because you can't predict for that, and the local governments love to get more money, so they're gonna increase the tax rate. So at any rate, so there's that. But you know what? I'll get over that. That's something that comes with the territory. The positive being that I TikTok tried to get me again. I think I already disclosed that I had bought the infamous unbrush through TikTok because of, well, let's be realistic. I mean, I have different challenges in my life than say somebody like you, John, or you, Philip. So
hair
That's the
loss.
business episode.
exactly. So at any rate, I TikTok has been blowing up these portable monitors. That's kind of been all the rage. It's not. They're like the same size as like a laptop screen, but they just are a second monitor, portable monitor. So I did not buy it on TikTok. I actually got it through Amazon on Amazon deals. But it's technology and it's fresh and it smells new. So I'm excited. But that's it. That's all I got.
Is it one of the monitors that basically it's portable and it just attaches over your other monitor? You hit a USB and then you have two monitors at the same time, or
no, it's not. It's not actually attached. I've seen those where they kind of actually attach to your physical device. No, this is a standalone that comes with like a flip cover, and then the cover doubles as a stand, and then it just connects. It's powered through your laptop, and then you just connect it via USB-C cable and a mini
portable
HDMI
second screen.
Yeah, so you just throw it in your laptop bag, and it weighs less than a pound. And so, like nowadays, we all operate. Many of us operate on multiple monitors for different reasons. And so, when I travel with my laptop, and you go into an office environment, a lot of times you're like, people go over your shoulder, like, "Hey, can you help me with this? Can you?" And you're like, "Man, I can't. I don't have two screens." So I'm rectifying that immediately. So.
Nice. Yeah, I've seen the ones where they attach and you have onto your laptop. You have I end up with 3 monitors, which looks pretty cool, but
it's so not cool actually.
Yeah.
It's really not to have 3, and they have the cradle. You have to.
I'm not going that route.
Well, I mean, one of them is almost 25 inches diagonal, and you're gonna put it in the ace. So you throw it in the cradle. Yeah, it's not quite that simple. Or so that's no more. So what I have right now is a very svelte 16 inches, which is actually a lot. In a purse these days.
What we've learned from Tim.
That was a very weird comment, Philip. How was your week?
My week has been spectacular.
Nice.
Am I in sync here? I kind of feel like
you're in sync, baby. You're in sync. Don't do that. You'll throw me off, man.
We've converted to a kung
if you don't have your Wi-Fi in check, I can't help you. That said, it's been a week of wonder and all kinds of. I had a birthday. I turned older. Thank you very, very much. It's that really wonderful age. I'm really getting. I'm 49, which means I'm really getting comfortable with the idea of 50 because I'm really all right with it.
Yeah.
There was something about 40 that sucked, and like 41 was much better.
60 is the new 40, so
it is.
You're good. 50 is the new 30, so I'm 62.
I actually went to Temple, and I said, "Help me. I'm sorry, but if there's something that you want to tell me about what I'm doing wrong, please feel free to drop me a text." And all those things going through my mind, what do I need to atone for? This, that, and the other. And it occurred to me that maybe just thinking about it was a start. And we've had COVID and all kinds of stuff. So actually being there for synagogue, and the Kol Nidre service is one that I usually go to because they have this gorgeous cello player. Anyhow, it's very nice. So I did that, turned 49, not 50. And I installed my first hardwired smart dimmer / fan control switch successfully. Ooh! And no one was electrocuted. No one died.
Welcome to the dark side, Philip. Welcome to the dark side.
See, this is the problem. Now I have all kinds of different companion dimmers, little like light things that that you can sort of like and Google is answering all kinds of false positives. So like, Gary, I'm sorry, I didn't understand. It'll just go for nowhere. Her microphone is off. But we've had an interesting week, and that's all I have to say about that.
Will Phil be buying a tool belt soon?
I have a tool belt, John.
Okay.
I have to buy tools to put in it.
Oh, you got to buy the tools. Okay.
No, I have lots of tools. They're just scattered about the country. Actually, North America, if I think about it.
That sounds like me. I had tools, and now my kids have tools. That's how I look at it.
That's right. They've stolen your tools.
Oh, and how's your week going?
You talking to me?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Yeah. I blanked out for a second.
Man, I'll tell you, the week is going good. I'm getting ready. I tend to do a lot of business traveling because of Leap. And so I tend to go through, I'm home for like 10 days, everything's settled. And all of a sudden I look at my calendar, go, oh my God, I got to pack for a 10-day business trip. And so the problem with packing now is I hate checking bags, right? Yeah. As a woman, and all you women out there understand, packing shoes takes, I have to be, it's like, okay, I'm going to be gone for 10 days. In 3, I go to San Diego, then I got to fly to DC, and then I got to go to Phoenix. And I have to be at conferences and moderating panels, and I have, a really conservative organization, and I'm at, and it's like, oh, I'm going to be spending 3 hours trying to figure out what I'm going to wear and in order to fit it into a carry-on and like a backpack. And so, but the week is good. Work is work. I have a great granddaughter who's spending a lot of time at the house. So she breaks up the monotony of work and the stress and frustration. And, you really forget how babies, no matter what they do, can just make you smile. And the dopamine that gets released when you're holding them, or they're laughing, or they're cackling, so it's been a great week, John, and I really appreciate you asking. So how about your week, John?
It's going good. And I have my grandkids come over, and my kids always say, no espresso for the kids, please, Dad, stop giving the kids espresso.
The funny thing, he's not telling the joke. He really does that. Don't do that.
I really do. It's like, hey,
how old are they?
The oldest, going to have 9 here pretty soon. So the oldest is 12. Yeah. So they're all the way down to the youngest are a year and a half, the 2 youngest, the 2 girls, but then all the way up to 12. But
your grandson is 12?
My oldest grandson is
9 grandkids.
Wow.
9 grandkids. Yeah. My kids have been busy.
I was just going to say, do they know what causes that?
They are officially all done. So this is the last one's coming in December, and then that's it. But you're right. When they get here, my attitude, everything just simply changes, and I go into this grandpa mode, and they cannot do nothing wrong except, except for touching my TV. They're not allowed to touch the TV, but they're great, and I love having them around. So unfortunately now I have one. My oldest has moved to Connecticut. He's in the Navy, and so 2 are over there. One lives, or the 4 live about 15-20 minutes away from me. But my daughter now, she moved about an hour away from me, so I don't see them as much as I used to. But when they're here, it's game over. It's park, it's running around doing things, and I tried to get them into my hobbies, hiking and photography. And my oldest grandson, he's been doing it. He's been loving it. So I got him his own camera.
Fabulous.
So he was, but
what'd you get him? Tell us.
A Canon. I got him a DSLR. Yeah, Canon. And I've noticed that 12 is, I forgot what 12 was like, we're all thinking our heads like 12 is like, no, I kind of want to hang out with you, but can I just play the Switch? Can I be on Nintendo? Can I do?
Right.
So it's a little different. I'm getting used to him being much older and kind of having his own ways and doing things and stuff. So, Tim, you know what time it is, buddy?
Let me think about it for a minute. Let me pull
That's
on my
part
the
of
great
the show.
Karnak powers of Jimmy Carson.
Karnak.
Hey everybody! Oh, he was gonna try to get me. I know you were gonna try to. I love this music. I don't know. I was gonna ask everybody as the show was starting, especially to the group out there that watches from the pulpit. Do you guys feel like maybe when the music starts for the show that maybe it should be a tire commercial? I don't know. Just
I feel like I
music-
have 5 seconds left to
it
answer
just
the
sort of
question
feels
correctly.
That way. I don't know. But let's say hi to some of the beautiful people in the crowd, and let's start off with the Lost World of JJ. And you know what? I love the usernames that people have. And I'm gonna do it because when I see this one, you know what I think of instantaneously, being 55 years old. Marshall, Will, and Holly on a routine expedition. The Land of the Lost, kids. Anybody watch Lost Superstars half hour growing up? Anyway, good to see you, Lost World of JJ. Tom Morowitz, always a pleasure to see you, sir. How you been doing? Let's keep scrolling down the list. I'm waiting for the ladies, and we got one. Janine Timmons, wonderful to see you, dear. Great to see you on the show. Peggy at eSig Source, here they're lining up, man. Here they come. Who else do we got? I'm scrolling as fast as my carpal tunnel will take me. The infamous James R is in the house. The pirate is in the house with everybody. Mallory Gates, always beautiful to see you. How you doing, Mallory? Pam Spraggins. I finally have that right after asking Spraggins a million times, but she knows I'll get it right every time now. Addie Tooney, the brother man in the house. Good to see you, bro. Who else we got? I'm scrolling. I'm still going. There's some bots in there. Bots being myself. Sorry, I had to say hello to everybody.
Mom, go to bed, please.
Elena Taradine, good to see you, dear. Wonderful. Thank you for coming back on the show as always. Beautiful soul right there, everybody. Get to know her. Who else we got in here? Michelle Elliott. Wonderful to see you, Michelle. Have we seen you on the show before? If not, you're stuck now. You gotta go for the ride. Yeah, you're up here for the next 200 shows, so keep coming back. What else we got? Who else we got? I think I'm getting close to the bottom. People like to talk really fast. Disio check in the house. Is it my check or your check? I don't know. Can we split the check? I don't know. That was a really bad joke. Anyway, Mark Sliss. Wonderful to see you, sir. Always wonderful.
Hey, Mark.
We need Mark back on the show. Mark, talk to John. Yes. We need to get you back on. We haven't talked to you in a while. I'm sure there's been all kinds of interesting stuff happening in your life. Don Ioko, the Scirocco man.
I got to put Don's thing up. I know. Where is Don's thingy?
Yeah, he had it last week.
Hold on. There it is.
There it is. Yeah, there's
got to put the Tony Soprano.
Don Ioko. Yeah, there's Don Ioko's uncle right there. Anyway, wonderful to see everybody on the show. It's Southern Vapor look, it's Southern Vapor coming in sneaky with the Michelle Elliott tag. That's okay. Incognito's the thing now, so it's all good. Anyway, back to you, John, in the studio.
Thank you. Timmy.
Well done, Tim. Well done. Bravo.
Well, we always like to start off our guests with some easy questions to kind of get them a little comfortable with us. And this first question, actually, we're on a roll here, so I'm not sure which way you're going to go with it. Pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
Oh, yes.
Oh, she broke the streak, guys.
She can have pineapple on her pizza.
Pineapple on pizza is good. Barbecue. You got to have it with barbecue.
Well, okay, yeah, that is true. That's
okay. On a traditional marinara,
it's got to be very, very specific. And women always break the circle, right?
Tiebreaker. There we
go. I might be the young in here, but I'm old enough to know that for sure. So
exactly.
Yeah, absolutely, you are correct.
And my next question for you: your first job you had, and did you quit or get fired?
Ooh, well, so the first real job was at Taco Bell.
Oh, yeah. My favorite place on earth.
I lasted a year.
Wow.
And then I quit because I got a better job at a grocery store boxing groceries. I was a box girl and I got benefits and I was getting paid a ton more money, but Taco Bell was miserable. Let me tell you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you
It's-
stuck it out for a year, and then you found a
You
better
know
job?
what? I did. I started working when I was 13. Taco Bell wasn't until I was 16, but I did a lot of
Yeah.
under the table work because businesses could get away with it back in the 1970s, right? And so
And
they
in
abused,
the late 80s?
yeah, they abused child labor. So I had a lot of under the table jobs from like 13 to 16, but Taco Bell was my first real job. So,
Yeah. I
but
bet
yes,
you were
I've been
happy
fired
that,
from jobs before, though.
yeah. I bet you were
Not that
happy to finally not smell like refried beans, right? I dated a girl from who worked at Taco Bell in high school, and I kept telling her, please just take a shower. Just take a shower.
So, John, what you guys have to understand, and I think Philip knows it, I was born in Mexico City.
Yeah.
And so it's, I was raised on homemade, unbelievable Mexican food. But there was something that broke me about working at Taco Bell and like the industrial size vat that you have to make beans with, and then the lard that you throw in that, and you just, you're a 16-year-old pimply kid
Yeah.
already. Oh, I used to come home and take an hour-long shower
Yeah,
after work just to get
she
rid of
was.
the
I don't know if
smell
you
of
wrote a
refried
thread
beans.
about this at some point or if we messaged back and forth about it, but I know
Oh,
little bits and pieces of the story just enough to where my heart wept a little bit for you because number one, I only know that you were born in Mexico City. I don't know how long you lived there as a child, but I do know that you mentioned something about you coming here and having very, very, let's just say, inauthentic Mexican food, and your heart being somewhat broken as well. And I thought to myself, there's just something wrong about that.
Yeah.
But I am curious to know, how long did you spend in Mexico? You were born in Mexico
so
City for. I was always intrigued because it was for a long time. I do believe the largest metropolitan area in the world, and
Yeah.
also one of the most terribly impoverished.
yeah, well, Mexico City's stunning. Yeah, I mean it's everything, from poverty to very, very upscale homes.
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
mean, it is very cosmopolitan. It's very European. Um, I have a lot of family there still. In fact, almost all our family's still in Mexico, and I love the country, but I came here when I was 4, turning 5, and so I spoke fluent Spanish through young middle school because we would go to Mexico City every summer,
Yeah.
or Guadalajara to be with the family and the relatives. And then my parents got divorced and we stopped going. And so, but it was a really very interesting, different immigrant experience because when we first came up, my parents would not let us as kids speak Spanish. It
Yep.
was, you're in America, you speak English, and like we would speak it um, when we would go to Mexico. But
Yep.
as long as we were inside the home, it's
Yep.
my parents were very much, no, you speak English.
Yeah.
So
That's
I
how my
understand a
parents
lot of
were.
Spanish, and I can speak some now, but I really need to go and fully immerse for like
Yeah.
months,
See,
and then
yeah,
I'd be
2
fine.
weeks. If I go to, well, if I'm in France or even Montreal, where let's
Right.
just say French Canadian and Parisian French are very different, it
Yeah.
comes back to me because my father used to speak in the house. But wow, what an experience! I think I went to Arizona State. I'm the only person who graduated Arizona State in 4 years. 4 years. That in and of itself
That's a
is
small number.
thank you very.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just saying.
I'm
People
kidding.
typically take 7 or I should have taken more time. I was the only person I think that I know of, well, that ever grew up born in Canada, grew up in Alabama, went to Arizona State, Jewish, decided to take French. Moron. I have no idea why I did not take Spanish because right there is Nogales, and let's
Right.
just say I didn't get killed, obviously, but it
Yeah.
came close. And no amount of French would have gotten me out of it. So anyway, that's very interesting.
All right, let me get to my first question for you. With your law enforcement background, I'm kind of curious how you would deal with the teen usage in schools throughout the country. And do you feel there is enough or isn't enough accountability on parents for their child's actions when it comes to vaping on school campus? I'm kind of want to hear a cop's perspective.
I'm going to out myself here. So I started a school resource officer program in the 1990s when I was still working as a police officer. Yep. And Redondo Union High School is just an amazing high school. And I was really, really lucky that they let me run it the way I wanted to. And it was about intervention, prevention, arrest was always the last thing. I was, mentor. I taught in high school the whole bit. But we had a small deli, mom and pop liquor store across the street that would always sell cigarettes to the kids. Yep. So it was right across. And, I would always go in there. It's like, hey, just don't sell to the kids. They come here after high school is over and you're selling them. Just don't do it. I don't care. You're selling to adults, whatever. Just, yeah. And I think that the issue is a combination. It's parenting. It's parents not talking to their kids about harm reduction. It's about kids being kids. I mean, we were all teenagers once. It's the only time I smoked was when I was a teenager, and it was just to rebel and piss people off. And, the cops and the teachers would catch us, and it was a very different time and a very different era. And we weren't so punitive relative to our disciplinary policies. And, it became about education. And as soon as it wasn't any fun, it wasn't, like my parents caught me and made me smoke a whole pack, one right after another. And I threw up. And it's a combination. Kids are always going to rebel. Kids are always going to experiment. And, we're all parents here. And Phillip, you have a daughter, right?
I have a stepdaughter and a stepson. They're not my,
but you're a parent.
Yeah. Oh, yes. And let's just say that if not for the experimentation that I got all kinds of detention and a little bit of in-school suspension for, I wouldn't have gotten tired and become a decent human being. And I kind of wonder, why are we doing this to our children? Let them make their own mistakes and they'll get tired and they'll move on to something that's useful. It's really horrible to see that, but please continue.
Well, but I think, well, first of all, is I was partially raised by a stepdad that I love to death. And I tend to view that step-parents choose to love their stepchildren. They don't have to. And I actually find that in many aspects really commendable because I like my stepdad taught me all sorts of stuff. And he was the one that's like, hey, you want to smoke? You want to drink? Here, we're going to teach you the adult way of doing this. And if you don't, this is your consequences. Right. And, I think people would look at that now and think, oh my God, that's terrible parenting. But
the neighbors would turn you in.
It worked and it wasn't abusive. And, they taught me a lot about both sides of my dad got remarried. My mom got remarried. So I really had 4 parents. And there was a lot of talk about how harm reduction without knowing what harm reduction was, right? It is, I think we do a very poor job of teaching our children about risks, whether they're public health risks or whether they're risks like driving too fast or without seatbelts or driving under the influence. I think we don't do our kids right by not starting to have these really critically important conversations with them early on. And maybe that didn't answer your question. It could be parents' fault.
Yeah.
But it's also,
Well, parenting today is a lot different than parenting was in the 70s and the 80s for myself and Tim and Philip. It just seems like today there's no consequences for their children's actions, and I feel. Go ahead, Tim.
I was going to say there are massive consequences,
right?
And those and I'm not purely describing consequences to the kid. I'm talking about consequences to the greater whole. And those consequences are, and this is where my question for Diane was going to go with this, simply because, I mean, obviously we live in a different time and day. The family dynamic is so much more different than it used to be. I mean, and that's just descriptive of us, none of us sitting at the dining room table together. And if we are, everyone's staring at their phone. But that's not my point. My point is that harm reduction, especially in the vaping space, I mean, and it's relative across the board, is that, this is a tool that we use to get away from smoking, right? Because I mean, it's clearly a health choice for us, to improve, and it's been used. It's the one methodology that worked for us. So the consequences are to the adults who actually are using it for the right reasons.
Correct.
So my question to that end is, it's easy for us in the vapor space, maybe people who are a little bit more fringe players, will be like, oh, it's all on the parents. That's poor parenting. And I don't know that I'm completely convinced that parents could emphatically control it 100% of the time, whether you have a conversation or not. I mean, I was a kid. My parents told me not to smoke. I ended up smoking anyway. So they had the right intentions. So what do you feel is the right approach to the kids? Because it's dynamic. On the one hand, you've got a harm reduction method in their hands, but then on the other side of it, you've got the government and everybody else saying, oh, it's killing them and ruining their brains and all this other stuff. So how should kids be addressed when it comes to this? Do you think it's just they need more counseling? Do you think they need to be scared straight? Like what?
Scared straight doesn't work. Let's just put the dare thing to rest, right?
Thank you, Diane.
It is, my policing career was 1983. I got hired as a 21-year-old, right? And I look back at that now, and we can talk about policing, kind of almost, I'm really happy I had my child before I became a sergeant, because in many aspects is managing male police officers on graveyard shift was like parenting.
Wow.
That's all I got to say.
Yeah.
It is
that had to have been sort of that was an entrepreneurial sort of position at that point, I imagine.
I loved being a patrol sergeant. It was my favorite.
No, there's one thing that I do know. You were
only to an SRO.
I can see you being a fantastic leader of men. How's that?
Yeah.
And boys.
Well, you know what? Here's the thing. As parents, I think we should always make certain our kids understand, never mistake our kindness as weakness. I think that's a really good analogy in service to people, right? We can all be kind. And, back to answering your question is, look, punishment has to be proportional, whether we're talking about the criminal justice system or whether we're talking about parenting our kids, right? And so every single kid reacts differently. Like my son, the thing that absolutely sealed his decision making was me basically uttering the simple words, I am so disappointed in your behavior. But other kids may have needed some other type of accountability. And there was a question earlier here is that said, how do we account for a lot of our children are self-medicating now, right? And how many of our kids are reverting to tobacco style products, whether it's cigarettes or e-vapes, things that are adult substances, because this is what always the conversation is. Drinking is adult. as we talked about passing, cannabis legalization across the country, or the work that we do there, this is something that adults do. We are always going to try to reduce the risk and harm to our kids, but I think that we have to accept as societies that we as people are always seeking drugs. And so how do we start having that discussion of what drugs are? And I'm not suggesting that we normalize, abusive drug use, but I think we have to start talking about drugs, that we're all drug users, every single one of us.
Right.
And anyone who was saying that that we're going to be a drug-free America, it's impossible. I wake up every morning, I have my French press coffee, because I'm a bougie coffee snob now, and I have 3 or 4 cups of coffee every single day. That is my drug of choice. I cannot function without it. Yeah, thank you. Right?
I just finished my 6th, which is why I have to take so many breaks during the show. Sorry.
Yeah, and so I think it is, and I saw another really good point, and it's a very valid point, is, every time we talk about something adults want to do, we try to push kids into using that. And I think that's accurate, but I think that it's things that we're not necessarily, what we're saying is to our children is, your brain is not developed enough. And if you engage in these types of risky behaviors, you are more prone to have long-term health issues, whether it's starting to drink too early, starting to smoke too early, and then a lot of times I kind of blame society too, in the sense of, have we over medicated our kids? Right? Is parents, a lot of parents, and I saw this with my son growing up, is instead of, oh my God, my son needs medication because he's ADHD. And maybe not. He's just all boy.
Yeah.
Right? And he needs to be in sports and to be physically exhausted. And so, how do we find that balance that protects adult consumer choice and minimizes the risk to our children? But I think what we're doing right now doesn't work at all. Right? It doesn't work relative to smoking, alcohol, drugs. But I also think what's really interesting is, if you look at every monitoring the future survey that I've seen, is, our kids are all right. They smoke less, they have less sex, they have less abortions, they drink less, they use less drugs. They're actually really boring in comparison.
They're doing
to when
so
I
much
was a
better
teenager.
than my age group did by, let's just say, orders of magnitude. And suddenly we're giving them all kinds of completely unnecessary cause for alarm. We're fabricating new and interesting ways to become, we must do something about nothing. And I think that, more than anything, is a real stressor on young people, because let's just say that if we could start doing one thing in order for us to really get anywhere right now, because I agree with you. I think that communication between parents and kids, and unfortunately communication between our federal health agencies and adults and kids, has never been more skewed. And the first thing, this whole debacle starts to heal when we're able to tell each other the truth. Tell your kids, hey, my father, for example, he's like, you get caught with weed, you go in jail. I'm not gonna beg you, but you better be careful. You do a bunch of cocaine. Well, it's kind of like sticking a little like penknife around. Sooner or later, you're gonna hit something you need, and you're and if you want heroin, let me know. I'll have a gun for you when you need it. He was a doctor. He really gave me that speech, and it didn't scare me straight. But what it was back then, it was a fairly clinical sort of, just this is what you have to look forward to. You can screw around with this. It's illegal, especially where I live. If you go to jail, I'm not going to help you. What he was very big on was, if you do get in your car and you've had too much to drink, God help you, which of course I managed to screw up once and never ever again, because that's the sort of thing we're putting our kids in all kinds of hog ties and strip searching them, and the next thing you know, you have a drink before you go over to Kenny's place. It's just we're a little confused about where where we need to be, I guess, how should we say, aware.
And so I know I didn't answer your questions about what should we do, who's responsible. But I think our government has done this for years, and they've done it around the issues of drug policy, going back historically to alcohol prohibition, or even if we start thinking about how our current drug laws evolved and made, right, is there's always been a moral panic, and always, what about the kids?
Yep.
Or if not, what about the kids? Is you think about, like, opium was made illegal in California in particular, was one of the first states that did this back in the late 1800s. When they criminalized opium dens, it was, oh my God, what about the white women? They're going to opium dens and they're going to have sex with immigrants.
Yeah.
There's some real distinctive, unethical, systemic, historically racist beginnings to all our drug laws. And I would say that tobacco control is starting to have a lot of the same things. I mean, we can talk about the menthol ban here, and its impact on vape smokers in particular, because I know tons of people who have quit smoking using flavored tobacco products and vapes, right? And so now, because tobacco was wrong. They marketed to Black communities, but they also targeted and marketed to all communities in many aspects. But in particular, menthol is, I think right now it's like 85% of Black smokers smoke menthol. Well, if you're really that concerned about tobacco, why are you just going after menthol? I mean, just be freaking honest, is say we don't want any tobacco products. And at least that's a much more honest argument. And that's exactly where it's headed. This is what Bloomberg's group wants. They're using menthol and flavors as a first step to trying to completely eliminate any type of nicotine products in the United States and really across the world in some aspects. But the thing is you're going to fuel an illicit market that's already there. And no different than alcohol prohibition, we're about to hand over a $30 billion regulated market over to really
criminals.
bad actors. And from a policing perspective, as I think about the cartels, and for your listeners who may not know this, or probably know this but don't understand the true magnitude of it, is for years the cartels have used tobacco smuggling products coming in through the borders as ways to test drug trafficking systems to see what's safest. And that just opens it up for human trafficking and everything else that the cartels do. So the more we prohibit substances, the more power we're actually giving to people who aren't concerned about public health, who use violence as a way to solve issues and problems, and are going to poison the market. And it's already happening.
I'm sorry, I have a question. So
Tim, you're
you're
up, Phillip. You're up, Phillip.
No, it's fascinating that you but I'm not sure I understand completely. You're saying the cartels historically have used tobacco products as trial runs, testing grounds for new methods and new route of smuggling.
Yeah,
for bigger and badder and more horrendous things.
Yeah, and a big part of it is because tobacco products, people aren't really looking at them as, even if it's an illicit tobacco or an untaxed product, they're not really looking at them relative to the real heavy punitive criminal sanctions right?
Not in this country. In Australia, they've
Yeah,
seen
in
a little.
Australia, and
Australia,
yeah, and
Why we
Australia
don't
has,
take a look at that and have second thoughts about our favorite menthol ban coming up? It's just a little bit strange to me, but that makes a lot of sense. It's very interesting. I've never known that they actually would take tobacco products and test run them this way and that way and see where the most successful or the most product got through. That's interesting. But
yeah.
please continue.
Well, Janine, you bring up a really good point. Leap has been in this menthol ban business, so to speak, since 2013. Like, people think that we just started talking about menthol ban products recently. No, we've been doing it for 10 years. Like, we were the only law enforcement organization who recognized in 2013 what was happening at the state and the federal level. And so we've been working on ensuring that legislators and policymakers understand this. And this year especially has been very interesting because I requested meetings with everyone from like the Congressional Black Caucus to the Asian Pacific Islander Caucus, and they just refused to meet with us over the tobacco issue. They just don't want to hear it. Yeah. And so people's minds are made up. So we have met with some federal congressional folks who understand and get it. But I don't know, so far I think that there's a delay game, that there was a lot of political pressure that's being put on the FDA right now. And it doesn't help that the FDA is getting hit over the head for their incompetence by people. And I have to say this about your vapor consumer groups. Man, I absolutely applaud you guys every time, the Vapor Association hits back, or Clyde Bates hits back, or Chauncey Gardner. It is, Guy Bentley. There are some voices out there, Helen Redmond at Filter Magazine, Alex Norsha. There's some voices out there that are incredibly powerful, yes, that are helping us do this. And what's really interesting, like, law enforcement doesn't want to be involved in the menthol ban business. I actually did a podcast that was out of the National Museum for Law Enforcement Officers that have been killed out of DC. It was a great podcast. Cops and law enforcement leaders have no idea this menthol ban is coming and that it's going to impact them. Mm. And so we're really working with a lot of other law enforcement organizations right now to try to get other folks other than LEAP to weigh in on this issue. And we're having some good luck, but I would suggest exactly what you guys are doing is you as consumers have a really, really good voice that you guys need to just continue to bang that drum as loud as possible.
Yeah. Philip, do you have a question?
He asked one. I thought.
Oh, he did.
You did. I asked for clarification about the test smuggling of menthol. So Diane, LEAP being a really impressive organization, I think one of the things that I enjoy following you on social media is because you have so many different connections. You have relationships and professional relationships, and you're on first name basis with a lot of very impressive pro bono defense lawyers, a lot of people who have seen the worst parts of the penal system themselves and come out on the other side, like Guy Felicia or Stephen Murray. A lot of these people, and they are some of the people I admire the most in the world because, I think I had a youngest brother, Jordan, who passed away roughly 13 years ago of a accidental overdose. And, we did everything we could, but these are people that, really did all the things that not many people do to get out from what is a very how should I say, an unfair, unjust system,
Right.
a cycle of keeping people who, quite frankly, are just in need of help. We're talking nonviolent drug offenders.
Sure.
It's very difficult. Let's just say the state of Alabama, and I applaud you for helping me out there, because and being in Alabama is the worst place to advocate for better, criminal justice in Alabama. But a lot of what I see with the people that you interact with is, they're very intelligent, very capable people, but it also seems like LEAP is somewhat isolated in that, like you just said, your organization is unique, and you have a lot of incredible people associated with it, but it seems like maybe a lot of, I imagine, senators and ambassadors and, the King and Queen of England are very, they're somewhat, I imagine they're intimidated.
Here's what's interesting. So, for your listeners who may not know the history of LEAP, so LEAP started out in 2002 as a single focus nonprofit. One Canadian police officer active duty and 4 retired American police officers founded it. And it was called Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. We were literally focused on drug policy, where these guys were visionaries. They were unbelievably bright. And they recognized that the drug war was the single largest policy failure of policing that did not accomplish anything of what it was meant to do. So in 2010, I came to LEAP. I got recruited in as a volunteer. I didn't even know the organization existed. Started working on cannabis policy in California right away. To answer your question, Janine, is my policing was in Redondo Beach, California, but I did a ton of multi-agency kind of jurisdictional work through the city, from gangs, narcotics, crisis negotiations, critical incident management. So I had a really, really, really great career. But we were outliers for a long time because we were the cops didn't know what to do with us, and the criminal justice system, because we were the people that stood up and said, the drug war is a failure. We need to sensibly regulate all drugs. We need to stop using criminal justice interventions to solve public health crises, because if it was at all successful after spending over $1 trillion since Richard Nixon, right? We would be drug-free right now. And we're not. Drugs are cheaper. We can get them in every high school, every neighborhood, from Wall Street to marginalized communities that are in poverty. It doesn't matter. And so all the harms associated with prohibition is it drives violence. It creates unhealthy and unsafe communities. It misdirects law enforcement resources and takes us away really from focusing on things that we should be, which is reducing harm in our communities and stopping people from harming other people, right? Since the 1970s, we've seen a significant decrease in the rates of cases that we solve. We used to solve 8 out of 10 murders. We're lucky if we're solving 5 out of 10 murders now. We used to solve more rapes. I think we're only solving 3 out of 10 rapes now. And it's been a couple years since I've looked at like really the latest clearance rates. We solve maybe 1 or 2 out of 10 property crimes or stolen vehicle crimes. And
because of drains on your resources elsewhere.
It's we don't have the resources, and the federal government, in its infinite wisdom, incentivize drug war policing. Federal grants for task forces that are solely focused on preventing drugs in our community. So let's have a rape task force or a homicide task
Yeah.
force versus a drug task force.
Yeah.
Unless it's a big store, you don't get a task force.
That would be very bad. I have one very simple question. You were in law enforcement for a long time, and you joined LEAP in 2010.
Correct.
Was there a specific single incident during your career as a police officer that was integral in your decision to move on to police reform and speak out against prohibition, something that you saw that made you think, hey, we are wasting our resources and we're not paying attention to things that are truly our job, things that we are supposed to be doing? We're spending entirely too much time trying to keep this in line, and it's spiraling out. Was there one experience that comes to mind?
Probably, there's always like the epiphany or when the dam's broken, right? But I think that my entire law enforcement career led me to this point. Redondo Beach was a great police agency, and we really did a ton of community engagement. But the things that I saw during my career is the one place that it never made a difference how much money we invested in SWAT teams executing narcotics search warrants, or how many, when I ran as a sergeant, I ran a 7-man multi-agency surveillance team, and we did everything from career criminals to meth labs, right? Hand-to-hand buys, did a lot of surveillance work post 9/11 for JTTF, because we had a good surveillance team. And when it came to narcotics enforcement, it just, we could arrest 100 people for possession, there'd be 1,000 more. We'd arrest 10 low-level drug dealers, always trying to make our way up to the kingpin.
Making it up to the top.
Maybe mid-level, but we never got to the top.
You should always feel like you're clearing out the competition, maybe.
Yeah, but I think like one of the first times that it really was, hang on, that's my son's corgi. Oh my God,
Tim has the same problem.
I have 2 miniature dachshunds. I empathize.
They are so. I've never owned a corgi. My son's 6'6", played basketball for a year at ASU, and then had a heart issue. But long story short, speaking of ASU, here's this 6'6" kid with this 25-pound corgi, and I used to have a 120-pound German Shepherd with the 5'4" mom, and people would just look at us when we were out walking the dog. It was absolutely pretty hilarious. But as a school resource officer, when I first started our school resource officer program, my police agency decided to work with LA County Sheriff's Department because there was such a huge drug problem on our campus back then. And so they got 2 undercover cops from LA County Sheriffs to come into my high school, pretend to be students, and then didn't tell me about it.
Ooh, that's
right? So I have a whole entire semester where I have undercover cops on my campus. Like, and I just remember being really pissed off and angry about this. And so when they finally shut down the operation, right, and we're perp walking people, and I'm helping call people suspected drug dealers out.
We're talking literal 21 Jump Street kind of.
21 Jump Street.
Yeah.
Wow. And this is
there's like CNN's there's big press conferences, there's dope on the table. It's The Wire, right? It's like there's dope on the table. We did this. Look at how great this is. 2 weeks later, because I had such great relationships with the kids, for 2 weeks, kids were like afraid to do anything. 2 weeks later, just
right back to normal.
Right back to normal.
Yeah.
That was kind of like the real, I think it was such an eye-opening moment for me. And then rest of my career built on top of that. And then I had, for those that don't know my personal stories, I had a brother who was dual diagnosed, suffered from both mental health issues. He was bipolar as well as substance use disorder. And I helped raise him, and we were really close. And although he was 14 months older, I probably could have gone to the path that he chose. Like, there wasn't much that separated us. I became a cop. He had, some really interesting experiences, but got criminalized for his mental health issues, and then got his life together. And then 20 years person in recovery, volunteered, homeless shelters, worked, beloved in the community, really got his life together, lost his job, lost access to psychotropic meds, started self-medicating, right? Because he's got no health insurance. He's got he can't afford his therapist or his psychiatrist, gets caught up in the criminal justice system. And so that was kind of like the final epiphany for me. I had just retired as a lieutenant. He had moved in, and he got arrested. And I showed up to court with him in Santa Ana, California. And in Orange County, California, Santa Ana is demographically, it's our Hispanic community. It's our most marginalized community, lots of poverty. And I'm in this courtroom. He had gotten arrested for a very, very small amount of meth. Like, literally, it was like a pin drop. I'm like, what kind of bullshit is this, right? It's like, we wouldn't even do that. But it was like, okay, so I knew legally what he was entitled to. He was entitled to deferred entry of judgment. I had like 20 letters of recommendation for all the work that he'd done in the community. I had letters from therapists and psychiatrists about what he needed. I got him into a drug treatment facility, walked him into court. Baby DA wants to cut her teeth on, a conviction. And I walked up and introduced myself. I didn't, I said, this is who I am. I'm here representing my brother. I'm not asking for any special treatment. I know what he's entitled to. He'll plead guilty today. We just want to get him into drug treatment. And she popped open his records, and he had a felony conviction when I was like 22. So you would have been like 24. And maybe 25, so maybe I was a little bit older, and for possession of a sawed-off shotgun. And because of that one conviction, he had not been arrested in over 20 years.
Yeah.
She looked at it and said, nope, I'm sending your brother to state prison for 18 months to 3 years.
Wow.
And I remember whipping my head around in court because I was so pissed because I didn't want to say anything to her at that moment. And this was before court was in session. And when I looked around, every single person in that courtroom that was sitting there was Black, brown, or Asian.
All right.
There was no white people sitting like, waiting for arraignment. And then I looked around, and, although I'm Mexican, and although my brother and I were raised culturally Mexican, we look white. The only white people were me, my brother, the DA, the public defender, the court clerk, the bailiff, and the judge.
And the judge.
And it was such a like
Eye-opener.
I had done a lot of gang work, and there was this one family that I worked with a lot, and I got the husband a job and helped out with the kids, and really, really kind of took them on under my wing and checked in on them. They were just really good people. And I remember Julia telling me one day, Mrs. Goldstein, you don't understand what it's like not to have resources, not to be a person who has resources and doesn't know how to navigate the system. And so my epiphany was, I turned around, I said it to the DA, and I wasn't trying to be snarky. And I looked at her, I said, the difference between my brother and every other defendant out there right now is I know the law and I have resources.
Yeah.
And I got him an attorney. I called an attorney friend of mine who used to be a prosecutor, who said, are you freaking kidding me? They wouldn't give you, he's totally entitled to deferred entry of judgment. So I hired him. We got him into drug treatment and everything else. And he did on and off again, fairly good. But then he died of a polydrug overdose in 2007. And so I had really the personal and the professional experience of the failures of prohibition.
Yeah.
And so it's,
I'm going to swing it up to Mr. Tim up there.
Yeah.
Tim's got a question for you.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you talk about, the inequalities and stuff like that, it's all relevant, right? I mean, I hate to put metrics on any of that sort of stuff, but with regard to sort of like you mentioned, sort of the stress that gets put on the police force to have to take on added policing measures, clearly it starts to stack the deck. I mean, you have certain crimes that we would try to deter, investigate, and problem solve that make obvious sense. And I'm going to bring it back to the vapor space again, because obviously, you speak with government officials and people that have, some influence in different parts of the system. My question is, with regard to the police force, where we are right now with the current state of vaping, because we really honestly don't know what the end game will be. I mean, it could be the door stays open with a crack, the whole entire way. But I sort of feel like a part of us has to believe that at some point the government's going to try to take it away implicitly, right? That means that adds another layer of policing to the police force. So what's your take on that conceptual idea, in the sense that it's going to start taking people like Phillip, myself, and John, who pay our taxes, pay our bills, live law-abiding lifestyles, and because we're trying to quit smoking, we want to continue to vape, it effectively turns us into criminals overnight, right?
Correct.
And so how does that look coming from the perception of a police officer? And in tandem with that, how do you now at this point get out ahead of that and speak to the people that you have your channels for, to say, hey, look, you realize what we're getting ready to do? We're taking your next door neighbor who you love dearly and is not a bad person, and you're about to turn him into a criminal.
Yeah. And, it's really interesting because you guys obviously weighed in on the FDA issues. And when we first started talking to, we've talked to the FDA, right? And the FDA's disingenuous response to us, and that's just the best way of describing it, was, oh, you guys at the street level aren't allowed to enforce federal law. And we're not going to criminalize consumers. Literally, this is what we were told. It was like we were the dumb cops. But it was very interesting because they had not talked about enforcement or we're not going to criminalize people until we forced them to do it. And
when was this? Recently?
This was 2 years ago. So the first hearings that happened, when we knew that hearings were going to come up, and we requested a conversation with the FDA through the White House, and we were allowed one conversation with them, and they have absolutely refused to talk to us ever since.
Who did you meet with, if you don't mind me asking?
God, what was her name? Okafar? She was actually working both for the White House counsel, but attached to the FDA, overseeing the equity issue, which is really interesting. And so, it's the race equity health issue.
No,
right?
I'm somewhat familiar with it.
Yeah, and so it was, and we quite frankly told her, is you don't understand how law enforcement operates in the world. Yeah. If you don't think that when the federal government is going to ban a product, every other state is then going to do the same thing, just like we're seeing in, local ordinances and state level attacks. This isn't just a federal government issue, is we're all fighting this issue, trying to put out fires at every step of the way.
Right.
And so I really believe that anytime somebody gets hurt in the enforcement of a public health issue like this, we need to very clearly call out the FDA. And so like every time I've done an email requesting meetings with federal officials, whether they're regulatory or others, is I have this whole list of all the harms and every bad thing that's happened. Teenagers getting tased in Ocean Beach, Maryland. Adults getting punched because they're vaping.
Strip searched teenagers.
Teenagers, you know, is if that was my kid, right? It's like, you gotta be kidding me. And so I think that we need to have a strategy, both from the policing perspective, from the consumer perspective, from the vape industry perspective, you know, the small shop owners, is every time anyone gets hurt, we need to amplify it, and we need to basically say, we told you so.
Yeah.
And the minute somebody gets killed, we really need to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Which has just happened in Australia over the tobacco gang war violence. A 27-year-old who it's horrifying.
Well, that gets me to my next question for you. In 2023, Biden requested $42.5 billion for national drug control program agencies, which was like $3.2 billion increase over 22.
Right.
As someone that has experience in the situation firsthand on the street and back in law enforcement days, and with LEAP, do you feel the funds are being utilized in the proper channels? And when it comes to harm reduction, and what do you feel is missing from these agencies or programs, whether it's education, funding, or staffing?
You know, to the Biden-Harris administration, I'm going to say that they were the first administration to actually fund harm reduction, right? But that harm reduction wasn't about tobacco harm reduction. Let's be very clear. It was about drug harm reduction. And I think we somehow need to start linking tobacco harm reduction with all forms of harm reduction. So we also belong to a coalition now that our street started, that's called Integrated Harm Reduction, that includes tobacco harm reduction as part of the greater harm reduction conversation. And one of their intents and one of their goals very specifically is that we as advocates here need to teach other harm reduction organizations that tobacco harm reduction is harm reduction. You know, I think that tobacco harm reduction has been stigmatized because of big tobacco. And we need to stop stigmatizing people who are trying to better their lives. And so, Rachel, I saw, you know, any discussion about abandoned pain patients and the criminalization of essential pain medicines, right? We knew years ago that harm reduction was so critically important, but the administration, and this goes back, you know, to the Obama administration when they cranked down on opioid prescribers, right? And so there's a falseness. I'm not a Sackler fan. I'm not a big tobacco fan. And Kevin Sabet has accused me of being a Sackler fan because I promote safe supply.
That guy's an asshole, by the way.
Yeah, he is, absolutely.
Sorry.
And so I always call him out on the carpet because he did a quote in the Huffington Post that I've used against him religiously when I write about his shenanigans, is that he was quoted in the Huffington Post about this issue that the ONDCP's office understood. They didn't know if it was going to happen, but they were pretty certain. They figured out that if they were going to crack down on these pill mill bad doctors, that it could have an impact on chronic pain patients. But they did it anyway. And what we did is we moved chronic pain patients into the illicit market, into heroin, you know, because Oxycontins were so expensive on the street. I know people who were paying $65 a pill, right? For one Oxycontin pill. And then, people went, it's too expensive. We're going to start using heroin. Then we cracked down on heroin. And what happened? We have fentanyl. And now we're cracking down on fentanyl. Now we have xylazine, right? And so this is the iron law of prohibition. Instead of really thinking about what should the intent of all our drug control strategies, which includes tobacco control, right? I'm going to emphasize that because I do this with people all the time, is the United States, from a policy perspective, our drug control strategies have never been about saving lives. There's no intent. There is nothing said in our drug control strategies that our drug control strategies should simply be about saving lives, and that there should be heavy investments into harm reduction products and things that we know work to save people's lives. Criminalization doesn't. We don't have enough money out in harm reduction. And the other complaint that we're getting, and I think this is really important, is that for harm reduction workers out in the street who are doing the work, that money hasn't rolled down to them at all. And because it's stuck in bureaucracies. So we're not going to fix any of these systems until we fix how we can appropriate money in a timely fashion to actually get it to the folks who are doing the work on the ground.
It's been a talking point for so many truly unworthy people to get elected. It's been a talking point. We're going to get tough on crime, tough on drugs, and all the time they don't have a clue as to what it is. The complexities of what they're talking about. Briefly, I'll tell you. Many years ago, when there was still a quote vape radio, we had then Coach Tuberville. God help me. Yeah, please. It's my IQ is plummeting. Anyhow, Rod, the host of Vape Radio, had then Coach Tuberville on, and this is back when he was still, someone who was sane. And he said, "If you are elected to the U.S. Senate, will you protect our rights to not smoke and choose something safer?" And I said, "Absolutely, absolutely." Well, let's just say he hasn't picked up the phone when I've called many number. I thought. And I don't really think that there is any interest. So a part of me thinks that nicotine vaping has to be illegal for a while before people will actually start thinking about giving it a chance, because it seems like we're making a lot of progress, at least in areas. We're not making a lot of progress. We're making progress with marijuana. And that's something that I would like to ask you about. It seems like all of the politicians that I share political views with are hell-bent on banning nicotine products. They're surefire. They're ready to release the weed, but when it comes to something that's, let's just say, relative to a cigarette, innocuous, truly there's nothing on this planet that compares to the harm of someone who is a dedicated smoker like I once was. And of course, I don't want people who have never smoked or vaped to start, vaping. But I think our kids are, if I'm going to be just analytical about it, are a hell of a lot better experimenting with the Juul than they were with, a Winston or a Merit. So what I guess what I'm trying to say is, I've been astonished. The people that I agree with nothing about want to defend people's right to smoke vape.
Right.
And then the people I have a lot in common with, they think nicotine is the devil. And I think you understand what I'm talking about. And it's been very frustrating. But more than anything, I'm convinced that, and there are a lot of very high profile marijuana legalization advocates that have made they have made it no secret that they could care less about tobacco harm reduction, and that's changing a bit. But for a while, actually recently, it's been a little almost hostile, and I'm curious, why do you think that is? Because I think that we have a lot more to fight for in common than we do not.
I think that the issue is drug exceptionalism, right? So, it's so interesting because people don't understand. Prohibition is prohibition. Prohibition is what drives all the issues, whether it's public health or public safety, right? Prohibition is what caused the Valley crisis. Okay. Those were illicit cannabis vapes that were aftermarket simply because it was illegal. And so, I think that, well, the United States has always viewed people who use drugs from a moral standpoint. And smokers right now in big tobacco are the new boogeyman instead of us looking at public health perspectives again. Even my mom finally quit smoking cigarettes this year at 83. And
she said she had enough, huh?
Mazel tov. Bravo.
And she did it because she went to the cardiologist who said, "Hey, you got AFib. You smoke? Yeah. Why are you smoking?" And she just came home and said, "Okay, I'm done," and finished off her pack of cigarettes. And said,
so what finally got her off the ciggies? Was it a Juul or an Elfar?
You know what? Nothing. Like my mom, it's really interesting. She's very disciplined that way, but I think that people have stigmatized people who smoke cigarettes as like really bad
Dirty,
people,
toxic,
dirty, toxic, just like they stigmatize people who use other drugs, and law enforcement has used stigma very inappropriately in a lot of ways. And I think it's damaging because I just saw, which I love when I see, hey, I'm a retired 60-year-old cop and I recently switched over to medical cannabis, right? So it's so interesting around this conversation right now because we're working in not just cannabis space, but regulatory processes. And I think if we were smart, years down the road, we're probably all going to be dead by then, unfortunately, is we're going to figure out that we have to sensibly regulate drugs. We're never going to have a heroin liquor store on the corner. But we're going to be like Switzerland that has heroin-assisted treatment programs that are empirically based, where people who aren't responding to methadone for their opioid addiction go in. They have to pay for it, kind of covered by insurance, but they get a safe supply of diamorphine. And what they have seen is amazing results. Crime has gone down, welfare has gone down, people have integrated back with their families, people are employed. This is a long-standing, it's not an experiment in Switzerland. The Swiss basically will never go back, just like Portugal. And so when we start talking about enforcement, again, this is the resourcing issue. Is there are infrastructure and public health interventions that are much more efficacious to the treatment of substance use disorder or any type of addiction, including tobacco, right? So why aren't we employing those first? And, save me for kicking a door down of a murder suspect, because that was always my preference, or someone who's really harming the community. It is the drug war has failed. It is this 60-year-old retired former law enforcement guy. You're not the first guy that tells me. I get emails all the time from active duty police officers right now as we're breaking the doors down on cannabis and psychedelics, who are like, I'm suffering from PTSD and I want to be able to use psychedelics to treat it. And it's like, well, it's illegal. But you know what? There's a lot of cops that are doing that right now, and firefighters and veterans. There's an underground train that helps lead people who are suffering from complex PTSD or suicidal.
Yeah. And the fear and guilt that we impose upon them by making it illegal, making it verboten, is only exacerbating the situation. And like Helen has done a film, I believe, on methadone. You're right. And that was something that Jordan, who my youngest brother, that was something that I know was going well for him. This was back for a brief time. Methadone was something that was prescribed. He could get tablets, what have you, and have a couple of weeks or a month's worth, and then suddenly the laws change back to no, you have to go and stand in line and get your whatever methadone, and then it became Suboxone, and then they made it easier for a while to access your safer alternative to illegal street, heroin, whatever.
Right.
And then suddenly they took away that access and gave them, not only made it difficult, but the access or lack thereof, the lack of access and the shame and stigma go hand in hand, because
Right.
suddenly
Yep.
you're back, waiting in line on a street corner, in
That's right.
with a God knows how many other people who are sitting there having to think to themselves, well, everyone's looking at us because we're waiting for methadone, and you are
Right.
literally punishing these people for trying to do what they need to do to be well, to function. And
Right.
it's the worst kind of, it's impossible to comprehend why legislators and policymakers don't see that when you guilt these people and you make it harder for them to deal with their drug dependencies, and when you make it a public a humiliating experience for them, they are going to stop seeking out the safer alternative. They're going to hit the streets. They're going to find something that is homemade and lethal, and that's the end of the story.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just that bad.
Yeah. It's really interesting, and I'm going to throw a little history in here, and I'm happy to send this article out.
If you have the link, you could put it in the private chat, and I can go ahead and.
Yeah, I probably can't find it right now because
Okay, yeah, no problem.
I can't actually have it as a PDF, so I'm going to have to go back and find it as a link. So there was a famous police chief back in the 1920s, 1930s. Police chief by the name of August Blamire. Those of you who are live in California or from California, University of Berkeley has their criminology department named after him. Law enforcement revered Blamire. He was the fourth police chief who led the International Association of Chiefs of Police. He developed beat cars, traffic units, forensic evidence, demanded that his cops have bachelor's degrees, really very, very visionary back in the 1920s, 30s.
Yeah.
He also was an LAPD police chief. But what was really interesting is he was also on the Wickersham Commission, which helped blow up alcohol prohibition back then. But I found a historical paper that was written about him based on his book, where August Blamire belief was that law enforcement should not be in the business of enforcing laws that are moralistic crimes. And he very specifically addressed gambling, alcohol, sex work, which is really interesting, and then drugs, right? He basically said that if we pick these things up, it's going to lead to police corruption. Shock of all shocks. How much corruption have we seen relative to the issues of the drug war, right? I think I tweeted something today about it. The DEA has a big major scandal right now going on.
Sure does.
He talked about, sex work should be supported and not underground because, again, it's both a public health and a public safety issue. Alcohol, he defined, it's like, this is stupid. We just handed everything over to the mafia. But he had this to say about people who use drugs and who were addicted, is he believed and he stated that law enforcement was never going to solve the problem of addiction. Only scientists could, and that we should have compassion for people who are addicted to drugs rather than criminalizing them, that the government at government expense should give them a safe supply of drugs.
Yeah.
This is the 1930s.
This is August.
Wow.
This is August Boughner in the 1930s.
The guy that stepped on the train brakes and was famous for that in his early career.
Yeah.
Okay, I heard about this guy.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So like he's revered, like absolutely revered in law enforcement leadership circles. The IACP, which I'm going to be at the conference this next week, or on Friday, has a
the
famous award for August Blamire Forensic Science Award, but they ignore what he said about prohibition.
Yeah.
Absolutely ignore it. So I use that all the time as a way to educate legislators, staffers, law enforcement leaders, and basically say, treating substance use disorder from a public health perspective will do more for reducing crime than criminalizing people. This is what we're seeing in other countries, right? Yeah. It is, and it, it seems counterintuitive.
Oh.
But and again, this is the thing that's driving me nuts about the FDA. It's like, oh my God, you want to hand a $30 billion menthol flavored market over to the cartels? Yeah. And what's going to happen is, because we're already seeing it, is there's some folks I know that do work in New York. There's all sorts of fake tobacco products being sold in the streets of New York, and like they're opening them up, there's straw in them. You don't know where it's being made. What poison is in there, what chemicals. Nothing is going to be regulated, and you're going to have people, you're going to have adult consumers, kid consumers, you're going to have people die from that.
Charlie Baker, Massachusetts was the first state to actually enact a statewide flavor ban. They now have an illicit tobacco task force that is, they're having to overfund this thing to, keep cigarettes, menthol cigarettes. I mean, let's just say whatever New Hampshire, Connecticut, I don't know, Rhode Island. Let's just say if they can get it from there, they're doing very well. But these are resources, like you said before, that are supposed to be for proper violent crime, and they've actually got a illicit tobacco task force that they are having to spend, I don't know how much money on, but quite a bit to enforce the prohibition that's not working. That is just, I could just go in circles in my mind, and it drives me nuts.
All right, I have some fun questions for you now. We're going to lighten it up a little bit. All right, this one should be interesting. Your favorite line from any movie?
Oh. Boy. Can I just say my favorite movie and not a line, because I don't remember the line, because Gladiator is my all-time favorite movie.
Yeah. Welcome.
Who said it? Who said it? Was it Maximus?
Are you entertained? Is that the line?
There we go.
Are you not entertained?
Yeah. I'm terrible at remembering lines, but like one of my all-time favorite movies.
I say this all the time, and I'm imitating Joaquin Phoenix. I'm saying, I'm vexed. I'm terribly vexed.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see him in Napoleon.
Yeah, that ought to be good. Yeah,
I hope so.
And the second one, this one should be interesting too. If you could put any franchise restaurant in your house, what would it be?
Ooh.
We know what it would be.
Most definitely not going to be Taco Bell.
I knew you were going to say that.
Probably not Taco Casa either, but yeah, I'm with you. Or Jack in the Box.
It's not Del Taco either.
Yeah. Favorite franchise restaurant
that you would put in your house. So every morning you get up, there's breakfast there, your dinner, lunch.
Waffle House.
Wow. Oh, good pick.
That is the correct answer. Thank you very much.
Because you can eat Waffle House at 2:00 in the morning or 2:00 in the afternoon. Yeah. It's a
somewhere Andrew Donaldson's ears are ringing. He's a happy man.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. I love that.
And the last one, if you were alone in the White House, all by yourself, what would you do?
Ooh. I would go into the executive room and I would write executive orders and then just implement them. So I'd be at the resolution desk.
There you go.
Basically saying, abolish the FDA, or at least reform it, right?
Oh, you're going to start a lot of trouble in an hour in there.
I would love
sorry,
to
I
tweet
know.
things like abolish the FDA, because sometimes I absolutely believe that. At the same time, I'm always, let's just say that you're good at that. My anger is not so pretty. It's not persuasive.
Yeah.
So it's, sometimes we get it right, sometimes we don't, but you do it very well. And I also think that, let's just say these days the FDA is doing so many things that make not only no sense, but are counterintuitive and destructive, that I feel like that more often these days than not. And it was incredible that American vapor manufacturers were able to get Brian King
Right.
to do a Q&A session, but
Yeah.
quite frankly, his ability to just talk through anything and then just completely and totally answer nothing is world renowned. And let's just say that's not typically indicative of a truly gifted epidemiologist. Sorry.
Timmy.
And it's so interesting because I've always looked at the FDA is supposed to be science based. But they're politicizing science in a way that's going to be really, really damaging. And then we can start talking about Bloomberg money, man. Right?
Yeah.
It is, what on earth, how many billions of dollars has he spent? And I'm guessing you guys and then a bunch of your folks that listen to you have had to go and testify, whether it's at a local city council meeting or at a state legislator. And my God, I've been called, for all intents and purposes, a carpetbagger and a shill for big tobacco.
Yeah.
We have too.
Yeah.
It's all
You
good.
work
Don't
for
worry,
big
we're all
tobacco.
shills.
Yeah, and I sit there and laugh and say, no, I'm not a shill for
Yeah.
big tobacco.
Yeah.
But
Diane, how did you spend that check last month? No, I'm kidding.
right? Personally, I wish I did get it. And you know what? Hey, I'm telling you,
I'm a walking, talking libertarian front group, money grubbing, child addicting.
Right.
Yeah. I think he put something like jerk on the end, but only different.
Yeah.
Timmy,
Let's just
you
say I
have a
haven't called it
question?
at all.
You have a question, Tim?
Yeah, actually, I had jotted down a couple thoughts. So, I mean, now that we're bringing up the idea of money,
Money.
Bloomberg, that's a very unique scenario because, I think outside of health or certain health organizations, I guess you could say that Bloomberg is probably our George Soros. But with that said, and without getting too political, this does kind of teeter on the political spectrum. But in your experience of speaking to legislators and people who you're trying to pass your message through, and maybe not getting the sense of urgency response that you're looking for, because obviously there's a lot of logic behind your arguments. It makes a lot of sense. Certainly, these people did not make it to a government level position without being an idiot. Okay, they hear what you have to say, and I'm pretty sure it computes in their brain that what you're saying makes a hell of a lot of sense. But they have a particular resistance,
right,
that prevents them from sort of crossing the line. So my question was with regard to how much do you think their resistance is relevant to, say, the greater majority of their constituents, who they feel like, well, I got to play the bigger base because, that's what's going to keep me sitting in my seat. And how much of that do you think is attributable to the controls of things that are somewhat static in our world, like, for existence, public health, the public prison system. I mean, I'm sorry, private healthcare, private prison systems, and then the influences of lobbyists and other large entities coming in, like big tobacco, big pharma. Do you think that is why they are proverbially stuck in the mud, so to speak?
It's a mess.
I think a lot of it is a mess, but I also think that a lot of lawmaking is done without really looking at unintended consequences or outcomes, right? And one of the things that in particular that we've asked for from the FDA and sent out in lots and lots of messages is, there needs to be a task force set up where law enforcement, where there's actual stakeholders, right? Right now the FDA pretends to listen to us by putting on these listening sessions where they cherry pick who's going to speak, and we can submit all these comments, but they're still going to ignore them. Right? I mean, I think about the comments. I know for 2022, I think there was like 85 to 90% of the comments all opposed the ban. All of it. Wow. That should have said something to them. Instead, is they're getting pressure from certain groups to enact the ban. In fact, one of the legislator staff that we spoke to basically said, we don't understand why it hasn't already been enacted, and we're not even going to talk to our member about this. Right? There was just this, what you guys, they just completely discounted everything that we were saying. And I always lead with folks when we start talking about laws, is any law, no matter how benign it may be, needs to be enforced on its appearance, that we don't think that there's going to be any type of bad outcome, right? Like a red zone, no parking, right?
Right.
But you're giving, or a tobacco ban, right? You are authorizing someone, which is the cops, to enforce this law. And if someone doesn't comply and it goes bad or south, like these situations can, you are giving us the ability to use not just force, but deadly force and kill someone.
Yeah. And in many cases, it's not even defined. It's just, it's illegal. And now you enforce it however, well, you don't even have any protocol.
Yeah.
Like you see in Ocean City.
So we have to be really careful what type of laws we pass. And then we have to look at laws we have on the books. And if they didn't give us the right outcome, they should be off the books. We have too many laws now that we don't. And so this is also the concern about this issue is, I see a lot of law enforcement agencies, let's say they pass a no vaping, right? Is it going to be like Ocean City, or are you going to have, respected law enforcement leaders who are like, no, we're not going to do it. We're not sending our cops out to enforce that type of law.
Yeah.
Because it's not a safety issue, right, Phillip?
Yeah, I sat down. Hold on, I sat down with an ATF agent a couple of weeks ago. I didn't know he was, and my cousin had told me he was, and I brought up that situation, and he just kind of laughed at me. He goes, "That's not a concern of ours. We have no."
Ocean City? Well, you know what the Ocean City PD is? It's essentially summer volunteers. They have police force. It's not actually I guess you could say, a police force like what Diane was part of. It is a volunteer, and they are more or less paid or graded on the number of citations they give out in a given summer. And they're young, green, and let's just say these are the kind of people that are going to make really bad decisions about nothing.
Yeah.
And likely to be terrified of something that they should pay attention to. And this is actually coming from someone that popped into a Twitter thread and spoke to Jim about the latest fiasco on the boardwalk in Ocean City, and said that he was part of that a little summertime task force 20 years ago said it was the same exact thing. They did it and gave out as many tickets as they could, but they didn't really have any sort of training, and it was sort of see how it goes, and give as many tickets as you can.
Yeah. There, I think there are ways to get people to voluntarily comply, and you save tickets and you save jail for people that really need it.
Right.
Most, but again, back to, I'm not a big fan of Lauren Boebert, but it was like she could have, that whole thing, all she had to do was like, you know what, don't vape inside.
Yeah.
Get up and go outside. Just be courteous, right? But vaping outside doesn't bother anyone.
Nope.
And it really even inside doesn't. But I'm willing to say that municipalities or private event space, it can have their rules, and we should abide by those, right? And be respectful of those. But I've been around enough people that vape. You don't smell anything. I've been around people that vape cannabis. You can't smell a thing.
Yeah.
I would say in general, vapors are, let's just say, much more respectful of their surroundings than we once were. And let's say we all have our moments where we blow a cloud in the wrong, and it's unintentional. But I don't know anyone my age or our age that's blowing a cloud over a 3-star Michelin meal. It's really not something we do. So the fact, Bobart was not exactly the vaping ambassador we needed.
No.
With your agency that you're working with the Leap, I'm just kind of curious with the younger generation, even the older generation, on social media so much. Is this something you guys have been focusing on? Maybe trying a different approach to harm reduction by using some higher profile social media influencers, kind of what PAVE and other organizations are doing, but they never seem to sell the harm reduction side of it. It's always the vaping's bad. This is no good for you. But they never seem to draw the kids away, not just away from the product, but give them an out, another resource. Is that something you can?
We don't use influencers.
I mean, you might. I think that might be.
Diane is the influencer.
No, I know she is the influencer, but I'm trying to look at it as in the eyes of a 15, 16-year-old, where Diane is going to come off as someone that they're probably going to try to listen to a little bit, but not really, where they may have a little bit more time to, I don't know how to put it, but it's sad. I know it's sad, but they're going to listen to that influencer a little bit more.
Right.
Your Jenners, your I hate to say the word, your Kardashians, these people, and using them to sell the harm reduction, because from what I have noticed is a lot of these people that are high-end influencers on social media have addictions and would be willing to share that story and how they've got through those issues. And I think they're not being, they should be utilized, because they are, the Taylor Swifts, the Kardashians, these people they have millions and millions and millions of followers. And I think they have a voice, and their followers do listen to them. Obviously, we know that. I'm just wondering if that's something that harm reduction may consider doing at some point in time.
We have our, speaking of being stigmatized, like tobacco harm reduction gets stigmatized, cops get stigmatized in the harm reduction world also. To your point, Michelle, you're right.
Good point.
It is sometimes we can't win, and so we really try to stay in our lane and impact what we can. And we do a lot of work in the harm reduction work because we think it's really important, because harm reduction really is about keeping people alive. I'm going to, and this is why tobacco harm reduction is so important to me, because I am never going to be hypocritical about we should have every tool in our public health arsenal, whether it's e-cigarettes, vaping, to safe supply, overdose prevention centers, clean syringes, test strips, everything needs to be on the table to keep people alive, because when you keep people alive, and then if we have adequate infrastructure that actually, and I think about the UK, and I think the UK is still doing it, but don't they give out vapes?
Yes.
Yes. Recently, they gave out vapes. It was a huge success, and
1
their
million
government,
devices.
the governmental want to be, suddenly the spotlight is open up for criticism, and a lot of people are bad actors are getting attention, because when you do something like that, and it's truly a historical sort of thing, suddenly UK politicians are saying, "Well, we should go with a prescription model." It's absurd, but
Which
yes,
is absurd. A
it is
prescription
absurd.
model is absurd, because this is just
Yeah.
like the naloxone conversation. It is, thank goodness, finally cops understand the importance of naloxone. But when naloxone was first being rolled out, like cops were like, "We're not carrying that. Let people die." And I literally wrote op-ed pieces that, like, "Hey dudes, that's your friggin' job. You don't let people die." Right? That's our job, is to save people. And this is what again, I go back to thinking about. We need to start really talking with officials that say tobacco control, harm reduction, drug control strategies are all essential services that need to be about saving people's lives. And what you guys are doing is going to hurt, harm, and kill people. And it's really interesting and very, very specific. And this is around the issue of disrupting the drug market. So one of our police chiefs is a NIH drug researcher, and he's friggin' brilliant. And if you guys don't follow him on Twitter, you should. His name is Brandon Del Pozo, but he was NYPD, Vermont, Burlington Police Chief, current drug researcher. And they just did a 2-year study of Indiana that has incredibly regressive drug laws. And they looked at over 1,800 drug seizures over a 2-year period. And this peer-reviewed study got peer-reviewed by like 8 peer reviewers. It was just incredible. Like they really put them through the ringer to make certain that the science and the evidence was sound. And what they showed in that 2-year, over 1,800 drug seizures, that the disruption of the drug market at 1, 2, and 3 weeks actually increased fatal drug overdoses, not decreased them. So when law enforcement goes in and disrupts the drug market, this will be exactly what happens in the vaping world. Like, let's say all vapes are made illegal, right? People are going to find or make their own vapes.
You have an adulterated supply.
So law enforcement's going to come in, they're going to disrupt the market, and then someone is going to buy a vape from some new person who has poisoned it or put some other chemical unknowingly in it, and they're going to die. Right? It's the same type of thing. Again, it's drug prohibition and these enforcement tactics. If what we're trying to do is save people's lives,
Can you get your head around the fact that we're actually making nicotine, which in and of itself is fairly nice? We're actually banning these products to the point where we're going to make them lethal.
Right?
It's a circus. It's unbelievable. But what I'm hoping is that the work that you're doing. As a matter of fact, I think that how you and I first became acquainted was for your advocating for naloxone to be accessible, and I think it was at a time where I carried it very illegally here in the state of Alabama, very illegally. And this was something I did for many years after Jordan passed. But the truth of the matter is people don't realize that in some extremely restrictive states like Louisiana and Alabama, that to possess something like Narcan or naloxone was
arrested.
Would have been arrested, most certainly. And to obtain it, it was well, let's just say I'm lucky enough to know a few GPs who were
people. You know people.
Right.
Yeah, Johnny, you have no idea.
Yeah,
Well, we
but just
have a
like the
few
UK, look at what's happened with naloxone. It is now available over the counter, but it should be free. Like every time, if you're an opioid, like this happened, my mom had a mastectomy last year, and when I went to pick up her prescription, met with her surgeon. The surgeon was, "Do you guys need a prescription for naloxone?" And I said, "Oh no, I have some at home. I always do." Right?
Yeah.
It is finally, medical providers are under. So we need to get medical providers to look at vapes in the same way that that we look at naloxone.
And let's just say that the average unit cost for a disposable or even a rechargeable pod-based vape, let's say that it's quite a bit less than the bottom line for a Narcan spray.
Yeah. Or getting cancer, right?
Yeah, getting cancer.
The only thing cheaper is a cigarette, I think.
We have about 6 minutes here, and it's a question we ask all our guests at the end of the show. What is the best piece of advice you have ever been given?
This too shall pass.
Oh, that's a good one.
Oh, nice.
That's a good one.
Good old George. That was all things must pass. Good album, long. This too shall pass. Actually, I think that was probably more like Shakespeare. My bad.
Well, you answered that quickly, so I'm going to hit you with some of our other ones here. This one should be interesting. The first poster on your wall as a teenager was. You remember those days?
I do. Robert Plant.
Robert Plant.
That's
nice.
Robert Plant with no shirt on.
Of course.
Wait, are we talking about the one with him smoking a cigarette, having a beer with a dove on his shoulder?
No. He was actually singing.
All right. Well, let's just say there was no one cooler than Robert Plant.
Exactly.
I saw him a little bit of him perform with Allison Krauss not too long ago. He's 1,000 years old and he's still a badass.
Oh, he can belt. He can belt it. I hear that's a great concert.
Yes.
If let's see here, since we're sticking with music, what is the one musician you would love to party with, dead or alive?
Oh, Dave Grohl.
Oh, wow.
Foo Fighters.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever seen him in concert?
I've actually met Dave Grohl.
You met Dave Grohl?
I've met one of my friends that I used to play in a band with in high school was the temporary drummer for the Foo Fighters when they played on the road with them. There's a band here called Verbena, and I got to meet him, and he was just at least this was 5 years ago, just a really great guy.
Love his book.
Good God, he's about 6-7 feet tall, and just a really funny, decent guy. And I suppose I wasn't necessarily expecting him to be a dick, but really, and the only thing I have to say about the Dave haters out there, whatever, that guy is, in terms of multifaceted musicians that absolutely happen to be good human beings. Here the surprise with Jack White, and well, we all know that Mike Watt's a great guy, but Jack White is actually a sweetheart. But Dave Grohl, to party with Dave Grohl is to party with excellence.
So he was my post-COVID when Vegas opened up. And this was in 21, is they played the venue at the MGM. I bought myself a ticket and said, I'm just taking myself to a concert.
Nice.
And he came out at 9:00 at night and he played, the band played till midnight. It reminded me of my first Bruce Springsteen show that I saw at the Roxy Theater back in the 1970s.
Tim, what were you going to say?
I'll take a 20-minute story and put it into 2 minutes, but I actually, I wouldn't say in close, proximity on a biological timeline, but I grew up with Dave Grohl. Dave Grohl was part of my teenage years going through high school. So he was living in the McLean, Virginia area as I grew up, and he was a big part of a lot of the punk bands that were playing in the area at the time. And he was in a band called Dane Bramage and a couple other ones. And so I remember explicitly, he had a show. Dane Bramage played a show at one of these dive locations in downtown DC, and it was a little army of 6 or 8 of us. And Dave, if anybody knows, he was never a formally trained drummer. He learned it all, and he just had natural talent. But anyway, back in those days, as being kids, there was no money to go around. The bands weren't making money. They were just, cutting their teeth. And, I guess they thought, hardcore punk was going to be huge someday. But at any rate, long story short, we went down to this seedy, sticky, beer-covered floored location with barely any electricity in it, and we played the show. And I had to be his drumstick catcher behind the drum set because he only had one pair of drumsticks. And he was such a monster on the drums. He broke drum pedals.
He's
cymbals.
like a gorilla.
Yeah, he just would crush everything. And so when the stick would fly out of his hand, I'd have to go run and get it and bring it back to him because he had nothing else to back himself up. But
you lucky bastard.
That's a great story.
There's other stories to go along with that, but the icing on the cake is obviously at some point our lives move on and we lose touch with people. And everybody had, a lot of people had moved away from the area. Right. I had no idea what Dave was doing with his life. And I turn on MTV one day, and of course, Smells Like Teen Spirit is now starting to make the rounds. And I look at the kick drum, and if everybody remembers in the video in masking tape, he's got the name Chaka on the kick drum. Which, if everybody remembers Chaka, especially JJ's Lost World, Chaka was one of the little chimp youngsters, like the cavemen dudes from the show. And I went, well, that was kind of Dave's nickname growing up because he had this sort of pronounced jaw like Chaka from Land of the Lost. And you can't see his face in the video because he's got it down pretty much the whole time. And so I looked up, Nirvana, and sure shit, there's Dave Grohl as one of the members of Nirvana. And so it was like, cool. So I kind of had my brush with greatness, my whole youth, but, never really. Good guy, though. Really good, down to earth.
Really, really amazing good guy.
And both of your mom's teachers, right, Tim? Both of your moms.
My mom was a teacher in the Arlington County public school system for 40 years. So I apologize. I lived my life under a red pen.
But his mom was a teacher as well, I think.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. They didn't know each other.
No, they didn't know each other. Yeah.
But he still, I think, periodically goes back to the McLean area. And some of my friends to this day, matter of fact, Chris Page, who was a singer in a couple of the punk bands, goes and sees him every time they're in town. And so there's always pictures of him and Dave, backstage and stuff. So I haven't talked to him in forever.
All right. I didn't want to throw this question out, but I got it because it's one of our popular ones. And we got to end the show. If you were arrested with no explanation, what would your friends and family assume you'd done? I'm kind of curious on this one, baby.
Diane, if you need to be advised by counsel, take your time.
It would be some weird psychedelic trip because only because of the work that I'm doing, right? I'm like it's like the former law enforcement guy who outed himself and said medical cannabis kind of saved his life. I'm a real firm believer that we have a lot of untapped plant-based and, even nicotine. I mean, I sit there and I think about what do we do about kids? Nicotine from a science perspective is good for ADHD, right? I mean, so I think that, if we could, if I got arrested, people would just make this assumption it's got to be, it's something drugs, or I was dancing on a table somewhere.
Real quick, anything you have going on you want to share with our viewers, and anything coming up?
And you know what? No, this was really fun. And so I'm hoping, like, down the road, if you guys don't get bored with me, I'd love to come back and talk again.
I'm back.
I was about to ask you. You just have to promise to come back so we can finish, because
this was a blast. I mean, this was really a lot of fun. And again, I think what I want to really share is how much I admire the vape consumer folks that I see out in the world who are really, I mean, this isn't a cliche. This is like, we all have to speak truth to power, because we have, that's the one, as an immigrant, this is the one thing I love about our country. I think we do have a voice. And I think that we cannot be apathetic about speaking out to make our worlds better, and to destroy stigma in every aspect. Because, and frankly, for me, I'm just going to say this, if you're an adult, you want to be a smoker, it's none of my damn business as a cop. Unless you get in a car and somehow hurt someone because of
you've got a red coal flying into
exactly,
your eye or something else. That's bad.
And I would say the same thing, is we and I think it was Michelle who said it, I blame legislators for a lot of the issues of law enforcement because they never funded systems that are more efficacious, that promotes community health and safety. Instead, they let problems get so bad and then they call the cops to solve the problem. But I also am a believer in liberty and body autonomy, and that my role is, if you want to drink, I don't care, but you ain't getting a car and hurting someone.
Right.
And you're not beating your wife and kids, I'm not going to allow that. But if you're an adult and you want to smoke a joint, I don't care. If you want to smoke a cigarette. But why are we taking products, safety related harm reduction products, that save people's lives away from them?
The whole constellation of adult rights, to go ahead and shrink that is just counterproductive in every way. To take away, it's the oldest adage. Carl Phillips was always saying about this. God bless him. He was caustic as hell, but that doesn't mean he was wrong. He would always say, you take a drug that is legal, that people want, make it illegal, and it will be replaced by something worse every time.
Iron law prohibition.
And it's just the simplest concept you can really come up with. And yet we have people in the highest places of power that do not comprehend that very simple principle. Anyhow, Diane, I want to say something. No, I want to say something just because I have to say thank you, because I think we were messaging and you said something along the lines of how my presence on Twitter made it easier to be on there. And I've been riding that high for I don't know how many months now. So I just wanted to say it was one of the nicest things anyone's ever said. So thank you for that.
No problem. And Skip's the other one that I absolutely adore on Twitter. And we can say a lot of bad things about, COVID and everything else, but there has been some good things about social media and Zoom and being able to connect to people in this fashion, because I feel like I know people, and then I have to remember that, like, if I ever get a chance to meet you, it'll dawn on me, like, oh, I need to give you a hug because I never really did meet you. Right. So I'm giving you guys all virtual hugs, and love your audience. And thank you guys so much. It was great.
Pleasure having you.
It's a pleasure having you on.
Happy to come back anytime you guys want me to.
Oh, we'll have you back on.
Bring it on.
Absolutely have you.
Thank you, everybody out there in chat, for joining us. I'm not sure who our guest is next week. I do know the name. I just can't remember it off the top of my head. But Allison set somebody up. Or no, maybe that's the 25th. I take it back. I do not know who's coming on next week. But we will see everybody next week. Thank you again. Thank you again, Diane, for joining us. It's been a pleasure getting to meet you. And
fabulous.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Philip. And we'll see everybody next Wednesday. Peace out.
We'll talk soon, guys.
Outro.
What are you?
It's doing. I don't know. I'll just end it because it's jittering.
Good night, all.
Good night.
You guys were fabulous. Thank you for the invite.
Thank you, Diane. Have a great night.